Yesterday, No Man's Sky rolled out full ship interiors for flown player ships, and yes, that means Frontier are missing the boat in a big way. Interiors aren't just a room, they're the connective tissue between the cockpit and on-foot gameplay. And the rest of the genre has moved forward. Elite Dangerous at the moment is now the only major space game without walkable ship interiors. We have them in X4 Foundations, No Man's Sky, Starfield, as well as Star Citizen, and whilst people's opinion on those games may vary, the fact remains that Elite Dangerous is being left behind. And let's not be mistaken, yesterday something pretty significant did change. Walkable interiors for player-flown ships in No Man's Sky, the ability to move around mid-flight, the ability to even change the interior of your ship and decorate it, and then exit for EVA. This reframes the ship from a vehicle to a mobile base. And why that matters beyond just No Man's Sky is that it demonstrates that the engineering and design of all of this are entirely possible even in a game that's very big and online. And that's already existing. This is not a tech unicorn anymore. It's not something that is miraculous and something that's impossible to achieve. That's not to downplay what Hello Games have done, of course, because what they've achieved here is pretty significant. In fact, it's downright impressive. And they've done it all without any additional costs to the player. So yeah, this really does prove a point. It proves that it is achievable, that just because it might be something that's hard, it might be something that's difficult, it might be something that's, well, perhaps expensive or time consuming, it doesn't mean it's impossible. And if it is impossible for Elite Dangerous, well, that's an entirely different subject matter, because at that point the game would have some far more serious problems than we're actually realizing. Now, right up front, I want to address the pushback on why Elite Dangerous should have its ship interiors. A lot of people kind of feel that they shouldn't. I don't want ship interiors, they might say. And that's entirely reasonable. If you don't want ship interiors, if you're one of those people, totally respect that. You can still watch this video if you so want. But the point I'd like to make there is that Elite Dangerous already supports multiple playstyles. If interiors did arrive just like with any other gameplay, you would be able to opt out by, well, simply not using them. They can completely coexist with the current UI elements that are there within Elite Dangerous. You can pretty much do everything from the cockpit. Other people say it adds nothing, you're just walking around a room, and that, to my mind, is completely shallow design thinking. A room with no purpose is of course a bad design. Any room, any game that just has a room that exists for no purpose, well, yeah, that's a bad game. There's nothing to do with it being a space game, that's just a bad design. Ultimately though, what we would have here is a ship as a play space, a self-contained system, and one which interlinks with the rest of the game elements. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The point is that other games show interiors where mission briefings happen, logistics, storage, crew roles, and social play all naturally live. The thing I'm trying to get at here is there's a lot more advantages to having ship interiors than not having them. Either way, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments section below, because I suspect that at this point opinions are going to be pretty controversial, although I suspect most people are going to be leaning towards actually having ship interiors, while still a few are actually thinking there's no need for them. Now, there's another point that's often brought up, the idea of spending development time elsewhere. The thing is, interiors wouldn't replace other work. The thing here is that ship interiors unify what Elite already has. Whether that's flight, engineering, on foot, squadrons, carriers, doesn't matter. They all reduce friction by turning menus into, well, in-game lived spaces. Frontier are already realizing this with the Vanguard's update and the squadron fleet carrier interiors, where people can do some of those things socially now, and this is something that a lot of people have been pointing out for many years. Ultimately, ship interiors are something of a coherence update. They're a massive quality of life investment. And of course, there's still examples where ship interiors just haven't worked out very well. For example, remember EVE Online's Captain Quarters. No one used it. That is often the claim, and that is exactly the mistake. There was only a room there. It was isolated from gameplay. It was just an empty room for people to walk in and perhaps kind of deck out with a few bits and pieces. The lesson to be learned from EVE Online is not don't do ship interiors. Instead, it's something else. It's don't stop just at a room. Make interiors purposeful, and they then sustain themselves. So yes, all the big major space games are completely different. They all have a different focus, and Elite Dangerous is no different. It still is very much about flying your spaceship and achieving certain objectives, although of course there's quite a bit of gameplay on foot as well. But we could have equally have made the exact same claim about No Man's Sky. For 10 years, very nearly, No Man's Sky has been exactly that, about spaceships, about walking around big, massive fleet carrier equivalents in the shape of frigates and other capital ships. But ultimately, there was no personal ship interiors, no flyable player-run ship, controlled ship, where you could just get up out of your seat and walk around. But here's the thing, I do feel that No Man's Sky has just completely validated the idea of walkable ship interiors. So yes, the No Man's Sky Voyages updates brings with it walkable ship interiors as well as EVA, and these all now work in a massive living space game that didn't have them before. It's not a theoretical concept, it's right there to be played and it's there to be used, and it changes how players not only inhabit their ship, but how they relate to the game. And this brings me on to why everything here matters specifically for Elite Dangerous. Elite, of course, has some pretty big strengths. In many ways, it is arguably the best overall space game out there. It does a lot of things that many other space games don't do. Elite's strengths are things such as being the best-in-class flight model. There's nothing else quite like it there. Get in your ships, regardless of size, and you instantly feel its mass and inertia. Whether it's an Eagle and highly maneuverable and fast, or whether it's very heavy, you can feel your ship's identity. Odyssey then went ahead and added legs, but Cockpit and On Foot still feel like two separate games that have kind of been spliced together. Ship interiors then are the bridge here. They connect those two separate games together, making it a unified whole. Stand up inside the ship you flew in, move to a console, a locker, a med bay. It means ultimately that there's a continuity here, a fantasy of finally living in not only the spaceship, but also this wonderful space environment. I could touch on some multi-crew elements here of walking around your ships with your friends, but the proof has already been validated there with the squadron of fleet carriers and the fact that people can already share spaces there. This was something that was open to question in some people's minds, but I think that point has now been pretty firmly proven. So next time we're thinking about ship interiors, next time you're looking at ship interiors and thinking that perhaps it's just a room, well, look at it perhaps in a different way. Interiors are not just about a room, they're essentially design surfaces for gameplay. So you've got areas here where you can route power, manage cargo, inspect modules at physical stations instead of just drowning in UI. You also get role clarity here. You get navigators sitting at the nav department, engineers at engineering, gunners at a turret bay, multi-crew with meaning rather than just duplicated HUDs. And as we're now seeing in No Man's Sky, your ship also becomes a base, a home in between gameplay sessions or in between missions and other activities. Head back to your home, which is actually your ship, which, as Sean Murray put it when it comes to No Man's Sky, is the most important character within the game. So yes, I firmly believe here that Elite Dangerous is being left behind. Frontier are missing the boat. And what I mean by that specifically is that it's not about copying features just for the sake of copying them. It's more about a parity of experience, even if those experiences are very different. For example, as GTA clones evolved over the years, they all had a somewhat parity of features, even though they're very different games. You can play Mafia, for example, or you can play GTA, completely different games, but they all share a lot of similarities. Imagine playing Mafia where you had cars and whatnot that you couldn't actually get in. It's a feature that's missing and it would just feel blatantly wrong, and I think Elite Dangerous is ultimately heading in that direction. Yes, it's not the best metaphor, but most of them never are. The point being that when it comes to space games, players are increasingly being expectant to be able to inhabit their ships, not just fly them around. And from that point of view, waiting does carry a cost for Elite Dangerous and for Frontier as well. Each year that passes with Elite as the holdout, the only major space game that doesn't have ship interiors, more players normalise the interior experience elsewhere and judge Elite against that baseline. The baseline being that space games have ship interiors, and for some strange reason, Elite Dangerous doesn't. Ultimately, that can be somewhat of a unique selling point. Some people will probably find an appeal to that, but, well, that depends on whether you really want Elite Dangerous to have a long-term success, and as it stacks up against other space games that keep it growing and keep expanding and keep improving, and Elite, whilst it is expanding, misses out on key features, well, that ultimately, like I say, that baseline is constantly shifting, and Elite Dangerous is just not keeping up. Of course, all that said, it is still possible that just maybe Frontier do have ship interiors on the cards. After all, there is an update planned for later this year that Frontier haven't discussed and haven't revealed in any way whatsoever. It's also possible that as we go into 2026, they will also have further updates. Frontier have shown themselves to be committed to keep adding new content. But like I say, there's no official announcement on that just yet. And even if they do ever commit, the key here is that it needs to be a systems first focus. Frontier would need to avoid the mistake that has been made by other space games such as, again, EVE Online's Captain's Quarters. It needs to be more than just a room, because obviously just a room is not going to be that appealing to anyone and would be a big mistake. But whatever way Frontier go with this, if they ever did decide to go in that direction, it would be very important to keep all the existing UI pathways, all the gameplay that's here in the game already, and that would let players choose which way they actually want to play Elite Dangerous. If they don't want the ship interiors, they can completely ignore them, and whilst they, I guess, might miss out on some of the aspects, they could still play Elite Dangerous as it exists today. So bottom line here, ship interiors are not about making Elite Dangerous like Star Citizen, and it doesn't need to be like Starfield either. It just needs to be Elite flavoured ship interiors, and that is something that would serve Elite Dangerous as a game. Travel, trade, fight and explore, and do all this with the interior of your ship as well. Keep the flight model king. Interiors don't replace piloting, they frame it, they bring in another element and make your ship more and more the central focus of the game. They can ultimately become the part that ties all the best parts of Elite Dangerous together. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section below, because it's a pretty big subject, and whilst I do feel very strongly that Elite Dangerous should have ship interiors, there's a lot of different ways they could be implemented and that could both benefit Elite Dangerous as well as harm it in a very negative way. So yeah, if Frontier go this way, it does need to be handled correctly. And as Hello Games have now proven, yes, you can add ship interiors to a space game and enhance all the game loops that already exist within it, without dramatically changing what that game is all about. Thanks for watching this video all the way through. There is another one on the screen right here. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.